Here we go. Hey, sports fans out there. This is Robert with WTP Sports Dudes. I had to jump on, man, because we had this huge debate in our chat with some of our homies who are all a part of WTP Sports Dudes who have their own YouTube channels. We've been debating in the chat on, is the Ohio State Buckeyes the number one football program in history? Can any team out there claim that they're the number one program ever throughout the history of college football? Because these two guys in the chat, T1 and FanDuel Zaya, who you see on this podcast all the time, they're saying that the Ohio State Buckeyes is the number one football program in the history of college football. Now listen, they got some really legitimate claims. They really do. One of their claims is Ohio State has won more football games in the past 50 years than any other football team. That's a fact. Ohio State has won more football games than anybody else in the past 50 years. But have they won more football games throughout the history of college football? The answer will be no. But then their rebuttal is, well, Michigan has played longer than Ohio State has. That is true. Michigan has played more years in college football than Ohio State has, but they have more wins, of course. But they also say they've won 3 national championships in the last 25 years. And that any team who has not won 3 national championships in the last 25 years would love to have won 3 in 25 years like their Ohio State Buckeyes have. That is true. Every team in college football who has not won 3 national championships in the past 25 years would have loved to have won 3 in 25 years. That's true. But my rebuttal was, which is better? Would you rather have won 3 national championships in 25 years? Or would you have rather won 2 national championships in the past 4 years like Georgia has, or 2 in the last 8 years like Clemson has? I'm not even going to mention Alabama because we already know, hands down, when it comes to recent history, the team who has won the most national championships has been the Alabama Crimson Tide. But of course, their rebuttal is Nick Saban ain't their coach no more. So Alabama's not the same program that they once were. Okay, let's look at that real quick. Alabama did not make the college football playoffs last year in Kalen DeBoer's first year. They're on track to make it to the college football playoffs this year, which means that, and they were right on the outside last year, which means that Alabama has not fallen off as a program. If they had a chance to make it, last year, didn't quite make it, but they're in position to make it again this year. Ohio State won the national championship last year, but the year before they did not make the college football playoff. Couldn't that be the same similar scenario that Alabama's facing? And Georgia, who I mentioned earlier, who won 2 of the last 4 national championships, did actually make the college football playoff last year. They did not win their first round during their first game. They lost to Notre Dame, the team who made it to the eventual national championship game, but they was also without their starting quarterback. All I'm saying is, can any team really claim to be the greatest football program in college football history? I don't think so. I think we got a whole bunch of really, really good or great college football programs. Ohio State is one of those programs. I can't argue that. They are one of the greatest college football programs in history. But can anybody claim to be the greatest like these 2 Ohio State Buckeye fans are claiming? I would have to say not, because there's no way that you can be considered the number uno football program in college football history when your rival has a winning record against you. How could you be the greatest program in college football history if your rival has beaten you more times than you have beaten now? And in recent history, your rival has beaten you 4 straight. But you're the greatest football program in history. But you have not won your conference championship in over 5 years. All I'm saying is Ohio State is a great football program. They are. They're one of the greatest. But I don't think anybody can claim to be the greatest like these 2 guys are saying. You can't be the greatest program in college football history, and you got a losing record against your rival. You haven't won your conference championship in over 5 years. You haven't even been to it. You haven't even been to your conference championship in over 5 years. Still a great program, still one of the greatest programs at the Ohio State University, but you can't claim to be the number one. No one can. Because every one of these great programs have been great because they've been able to win games, much like Ohio State has. They've been able to win championships, much like Ohio State has. But nobody can claim to be number one. Not number one. When you've gone to the national championship game and gotten beaten by Alabama, got beaten down by Alabama, faced a Clemson team in the playoffs that blanked you. You didn't score any points against that team. There's no way. And all I want these guys to do is just face the music that, listen, nobody can claim to be the number one program in college football history. Is Ohio State a great program? Like I said before, yes, they are one of the greatest programs in history, but not number one. Not number one, especially when in recent history you have a Nick Saban Alabama team who I believe won 7 national titles on Ohio State's watch. We're talking about 7 national titles since 2001. So 7 national titles in a 25-year period, I believe, is better than 3 national titles in 25 years. But maybe my math is wrong. Maybe my math is wrong. But like I said earlier, Ohio State is one of the greatest programs in college football history. I just can't say that they're the number one program in college football history. In fact, I can't say anyone is the number one college football program in history. Here's a little bit of more history about the Ohio State Buckeyes. They have some of the greatest wide receivers over the past, for as long as I've been watching football, they've had some great wide receivers. They can be considered wide receiver U. And they probably, in many people's eyes, are wide receiver U. I give them that. They probably have produced the best wide receivers in college. Now, they don't always translate always to the pros, like you see some of the other guys. I don't know if they have a wide receiver that has been the number one wide receiver in the NFL ever in the history, but they have produced some great wide receivers. They got a boatload of wide receivers in the NFL now who are doing really, really well. I can give them wide receiver U for sure. I can do that. But ultimately, to be the number one college football program in history, you got to go out there and win your conference consistently. Not every year, every other year, or every 3 or 4 years. But to not make your conference championship in over 5 years, you can't hold that title. You can't hold that title. One of their rebuttals was, listen, we didn't win our conference championship last year, but we won a national title. Anybody would want to win a national title over winning their conference championship. That's a fact. Everybody would rather have a national title than having a conference championship. That's a fact. That's a fact. But the reality still remains. Would you rather have both? Wouldn't you want to win your conference championship and win the national championship too? But you haven't even made it in over 5 years. So you can't claim to be. And I know I'm probably sounding like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again, which I probably am, but I got to prove the point that Ohio State, throughout the history of college football, is not the greatest program in college football history. Now, the team who has the most national titles is Yale. And I know everybody out there listening will say, man, you can't even throw Yale even in the conversation as one of the greatest football programs in history. They won all of those national championships probably before a person who's 100 years old was born. That's probably true. That's probably true. But they won 18 national titles. And it was a long, long time ago. But there is a team out there who has won 16 national titles, and they've won the second most national titles in history, called the Alabama Crimson Tide, which we already seen what Nick Saban has done at that university before he left. 7 national championships. So that is the case right there when it comes to national championships. And I know they want to give me that pushback. Well, nobody was beating Nick Saban. That's a fact. But the fact remains that he was beating everybody, which nobody was able to say that they were a better program than Nick Saban. Which means if we can't say that anybody was better than the program at Alabama under Nick Saban, then that means you can't claim to be the number one football program in history. Because you don't have more national titles than they do. You haven't won in the recent era as much as they have. They got 4 more national titles in the past 25 years than Ohio State has. So that's another claim where there's another team who has a claim to be one of the greatest programs in history or the greatest program in history. But I'm not even going to say that Alabama is the greatest football program in history because they've had some time in their history where they weren't that great. Even under Nick Saban, where they weren't that great. And all I'm saying is I don't think anybody can claim to be the greatest football program in history. And that's all I want these young men to see because they're both younger than me. T1 is a little bit younger than I am. FanDuel Zay is a lot younger than I am. I just want them to see that, listen, you could be a homer and love your team, but there's certain things you just cannot claim. And you can't claim to be the greatest program in college football history when you have the kind of blemishes that you have on your history. You do have the the two-time Heisman Trophy winner, which when you go back and look at it, that second Heisman Trophy that he won, it's very debatable. It's very debatable how he could win that second Heisman Trophy with 1,300 yards and 4 touchdowns when you had two other running backs, Chuck Muncie and Ricky Bell, who had far more yards than him, far more touchdowns than him. I think you even had a quarterback that year that had much better stats than what Archie Griffin put out that year. I ain't gonna knock Archie Griffin. He's from Eastmore High School here, a City League school in Columbus, Ohio, where I reside. I give him the utmost respect. I'm glad that he's a two-time Heisman Trophy winner. All I'm saying is that second Heisman Trophy that he won, it's debatable. It's debatable. Because 1,300 yards and 4 touchdowns in a 10-game, 12-game season is not that great. And then you lost in the Rose Bowl to UCLA. And that team was undefeated up until that point, which means that they were not the greatest team that year because they took an L. And they didn't win the national title that year, I believe. So there's another point made that, listen, even though you had the only two-time Heisman Trophy winner, you still cannot claim to be the number one football program in college football history. We talked about it in terms of national titles. We talked about it in terms of the winningest program in college football history. We talked about it in terms of players. But the reality still remains that you're not number one in any of those areas. Alabama has put more players in the NFL in the last 25 years than any other football program. And we get a huge debate about the SEC versus the Big Ten. And we all should be able to agree that from top to bottom, there's more competitive competition in the SEC than there is in the Big Ten. And one of my pushbacks on them was, listen, Ohio State has won a lot of football games. They've won the most in the last 50 years, probably even further back than that. But my point I was trying to make to them, what was Ohio State's strength of schedule? In those games, in those seasons, were they playing in those 50-year history? Were they playing the number one strength of schedule? Everybody in the country? Because if they weren't, then they might have the most wins, but were they quality wins? Or were you only playing in a two-race league every year, either with Michigan or with somebody else, if Michigan was down? And most times we can all agree that that Big Ten conference was usually between Michigan and Ohio State more times than not. It was either between Michigan or Ohio State. And every now and then, when Penn State came in their first year, they won the Big Ten, but they haven't been able to win a title since. And they've been owned by Ohio State and Michigan ever since. Wisconsin has won a few. Oregon won it last year, a newcomer to the conference. But the reality still remains that, man, listen, the strength of schedule in The Big Ten is not that great. They have 18 teams in it right now. Back when it was the Big Ten and they only had 10 teams, I believe they only had 10. That's why they were called the Big Ten. It was usually always Ohio State and Michigan. Every now and then they would get beat by Purdue. They would get beat by Illinois. But most times than not, they weren't playing against no high quality competition, much like you see in the last 20 years plus in the SEC. If you go look at every slate of games week in and week out, more times than not, the SEC conference had more bangers week in and week out than any other conference in college football history because they play a lot of quality opponents. Their stadiums, even when a team isn't all that great, they're just good. And you have to go in their home stadium, you're going to get a really, really good football game. And there were times when you got that in the Big Ten too. But more recently, you have not gotten that kind of quality, especially not Ohio State going into somebody else's stadium to play them. Those teams have not been very, very good. And if you look at this team, Ohio State now, they're a really, really good football team. They're probably the best football team in the country, offensively and defensively. I give them that. But when they look at the opponents that they played, outside of Texas, they really haven't played anybody. And they got to play Texas at home to a 14-7 victory. Now, I know that was the first game of the season, and they were both filling each other out, and they weren't trying to do a whole lot. And now if they played, it would probably be a lot more points scored. But the reality still remains that they had a really, really weak schedule this year, in my opinion. I don't think they played anybody close to their talent level. Now, hopefully, Michigan, it being a rivalry game, it'll be a much better contest this Saturday when they play. But back to my point, is Ohio State the number one college football program in history? And can any team claim that? I'm on the side of no team can claim that. And I definitely don't see anybody being able to say that they're the number one team in college football history. I like the fact that my man Mossberg of Level Up Sports 10 is in the chat. He's chiming in. He's saying a lot in the chat. He said they had a cupcake power puff schedule. In many years they have had that. They have played some tough games. I mean, here and there, but overall, in a 10-game, 12-game season, they haven't played a bunch of quality opponents in that time schedule. And we got to see that this year, even though they're a really, really good football team, probably the best football team in the country. Let me see if I got anything else out there. Yeah, they've definitely been one of the better teams in the past 15, 20 years for sure. They've been a great football program throughout history. I just don't think they can claim to be the number one football program in history. Much like T1 and my man Fanduze say a lot of times. And to their point though, I can't say that there's somebody who is being better than Ohio State either. I can't make that claim either. But I don't think anybody should be able to hold that number one spot. Yeah, SEC Sean, I don't think anybody can claim to be the number one football program in history. Everybody has had their moments. Yeah, we mentioned that earlier. Yale having 18 national championships, Alabama having 16. Nowhere in those two do I see Ohio State's name. So they definitely can't claim to be the number one program in college football history when they're nowhere near 18 and they're nowhere near that 16 of Alabama. Now, if anybody could claim it, especially in recent history, we could say Alabama. Yeah, Michigan has the most wins. We talked about that earlier too, out of everybody in college football. But of course, their rebuttal, SEC Sean, is that Michigan has played more seasons That's why they got more wins than anybody in college football history. And there's some truth to that. But at the same time, Michigan has had some down years, and Ohio State has had some up years. But the fact still remains that Michigan is the number one winning program in history. So you can't claim to be the number one program in history, Ohio State, if you haven't won the most games, you haven't won the most national championships. Have you even won the most um, conference championships out of anybody in any conference? I don't know if they've even been able to do that. So I'm just saying they can't claim to be the number one program in college football history. And like I said earlier, no one can claim that right. No one can claim that right. No one can claim that right to be the number one football program in college football history. I think I got it off my chest, y'all. I'm going to see what else we got in the chat. And he said, but they didn't play spot of games back in the day like they do today. Some of those seasons were 4 or 5 games. Yeah. I mean, they were short seasons as well. They weren't playing the amount of games that we see nowadays. They were only playing 4, 5, 6. Eventually went to 8, and it just was growing from there. But way back then, they wasn't playing 10, 12 game seasons. So it wasn't like Michigan had that much of a head start. I think it's SEC Sean's point. But yeah, I was glad I had to get this ran on because those dudes had my blood boiling in that daggone chat. Because my thing is, Ohio State is a really, really great football program. But some of the stuff they say, like there's nobody can touch them, like nobody can even get close to them. It's like, come on, man, stop it. Alabama just went on a historic run, bro, under Nick Saban. A historic run. They were the standard bearers. They said it now. Ohio State is the standard bearers. The standard bearers with 3 national championships in 25 years is no comparison to what Nick Saban has done. It's not even a comparison to what Kirby Smart has done with 2 national championships in the last 4, or what Dabo Swinney has done with 2 in the last 8. 2 in the last 8 and 2 in the last 4 is much better than 3 in the last 25 years. Yes, Ohio State's last 3 coaches have won a national title. They have. But is that better than Nick Saban's record? Is that better than Kirby Smart's record? Is that better than Dabo Swinney's record, 2-8, 2-4? And God knows what Saban's is, 7 in 15 years or something? That's astronomical, bro. So if you ain't going to throw Alabama as the number one program in history, they have more national titles. They're 3rd in total wins. They make the best case to be the number one football program in college football history. If anybody can claim that, which I'm not saying anybody can, it will have to be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Even under Kellen DeBoer, they were right on the outside of making the national championship last year, and they're on pace to make the college football playoff last year, and they're on pace to make the college football playoff this year. So, man, listen, I don't feel like Alabama has fallen off since Nick Saban. Yeah, they lost 3 games last year, and they've lost 2 so far this year. But Ohio State lost 2 games last year. They are the eventual national champions, but they lost to their rival again for the 4th straight time. And they play this Saturday, and it might end up being 5. If it's 5, now listen, if Ohio State loses to Michigan this time, after being favored by 21 points last year, favored by 11 this year, last year they had a way better team than Michigan had. This year they got a better team than Michigan has. If they lose this one, I don't think those two dudes can ever say anything about the Ohio State Buckeyes being the #1 college football program in history. And they want to talk about Michigan cheating. Well, if the record is straight, last year they won, and the coach that they talk about was cheating, wasn't even on the sideline. The year before that, the coach wasn't on the sideline. So Sharon Moore, as an interim coach, beat Ohio State. Sharon Moore, as their head coach, beat Ohio State last year. So that's 2 years. 2 of the 4, there couldn't have been any cheating involved because that was already out the closet. The whole sign stealing scandal. So, man, y'all can kill that argument, man. Kill that argument. And you don't even have more wins against your rival. I mean, I'm a Texas Longhorns fan, and we got Texas A&M as our rival. We got a winning record against them. Sorry, SEC, Sean. We got a winning record against them. Oklahoma is another one of our rivals. We got a winning record against them. And Arkansas is another one of our rivals. We got a winning record against them. You only got that one rival, and you ain't even got a winning record against them. Stop talking about you the greatest football program in college football history. No one can claim that right unless it's Alabama. Unless it's Alabama. That's all I had to get on to get that rant out, man. I feel real good now that I got that off my chest. Thank you, Mossberg, for jumping in the chat with me. Thank you, SEC Sean, for jumping in the chat. Everybody else that's out there in the chat, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. I appreciate y'all listening to me rant a little bit because I had to get that off my chest. Them dudes, cousin Chad, I know you love them Ohio State Buckeyes too, even though you down there in Texas and you probably want to flip over to become a Longhorn, but I know you're not going to do that because you love them Buckeyes. But I just couldn't stand the fact that they were so arrogant to say that they're the greatest football program in football program history. They had my blood boiling. Yes, they're one of the greatest programs ever in the history of college football. I give them that. But to give them the greatest, I don't think anybody can claim that. No one can claim that, especially not with the blemishes that Ohio State has on their history in terms of not having a winning record against their rival, in terms of not being the winningest program in college football history, in terms of not winning the most national championships in college football history, in terms of not winning the most conference championships in college football history. Those are the things that will decide whether or not somebody is the greatest program ever in the history of college football. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. SEC Sean, them Shorthorns gonna dog your Aggies on Friday night, bro. That's all I can say. I think y'all got the better team, Texas A&M. You got a better team than the Texas Longhorns. I think that's a fact. But the reality still remains. We are your big brother. You're our little brother. And little brothers get put in a headlock anytime the big brother wants to. But every now and then the big brother will allow little brother to get a little funky off. And we've let y'all get a little funky off before, but we not letting y'all get no funky off on Friday night. So go ahead and take this headlock. Go ahead and take this scrubbing on your head because that's what you're going to get. Texas is going to beat Texas A&M and put that one loss blemish on their record, keeping them from going unscathed in this 2025 season. I know you're saying 42-17. I can't see us getting beat that bad. I can't see us getting beat that bad at all. Everybody out there, smash the like button. Please subscribe. Please share this video. It might be a little bit humorous to those who are Ohio State fans, But I had to get that off my chest, man, because them dudes had my blood boiling, man. You can't really talk to them guys because they got so much homerism in them. And that's not even a word. So much homerism in them. And I made that word up just for those two because they're the greatest homers I've ever met in my life. My cousin Chad, A&M versus Texas is going to be a tight game. Only because it's in Austin. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's the only reason why it's going to be close, cuz, because it's in Austin. Otherwise, if it was in A&M, they would probably dust us 42-17. But the fact that it's in Austin, we got a chance. We got a chance. Thanks, SEC Sean. I appreciate it. Did you make it safely? What'd he say? Good show, Rob. Y'all be getting back in the road. Yeah, we probably will. Outcast. When I look at Texas A&M record, it's sketchy. It's real shaky, and they might go early in the playoffs. Listen, I'm telling you right now, if they don't fix their penalties and they don't fix their run defense, and if Marcel Reed has any shaky outings, they're gonna have some trouble in the playoffs. But I think if they can fix the fact that they can fix them penalties, because you can't go into the playoffs playing against some of the teams you're going to face, committing some of the senseless penalties that they have. And I think they're going to probably commit a lot on Friday night because that crowd is going to be going crazy. And when it's probably 2nd and 5, it's going to turn in to 2nd and 10 because that crowd going to be so loud, they're going to have some false start penalties. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But, yeah, they're going to have some issues in the playoffs if they don't fix some of them issues, and they got to make sure Marcel Reed gets off to a hot start. Otherwise, they can be shaky. But they do got a run game they can rely on to keep the game close. But they can't use that run game to get back in it if they down 10 to 14 points, especially in the second half. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad. Oh, you got an hour left and you'll be there. Man, that's a long drive, bro. That's a long drive. Or maybe y'all one of those people that make a lot of pit stops. But hopefully you make it there safely, SEC Sean. Make sure you remember to hug Mom for us when you get there and tell her we appreciate her son and what she's done with you, allowing us to have some time with you on our channels. So we appreciate you for that. But I'm going to get on out of here, man. I done ran for almost 40 minutes. I didn't expect to go that long, but shout out to my man T1, FanDuel, Zaya. I still love y'all, man, that y'all just have my blood boiling when you can't be humble enough to say that there's some other great programs out there in college football history. You only want to give all of it to your boys, the Buckeyes, which they are a very great program, but they ain't the greatest of all time. All right, y'all, I'm out of here. I appreciate y'all joining. And until next time, we'll see you again. We might make another video tomorrow morning before everybody get all stuck with that Thanksgiving dinner. All right, y'all. Peace.
There we go.